Good morning, grade 10s. Let's discuss exercise 2 of the notes of the parabola. If you must sketch negative x squared minus 1 without the table, the first step is to get the a value. A is then negative and showing the shape concave down, sad face. The y-intercept will be the q value, so it's negative 1. X-intercepts, you make y equal to 0. So you make that equal to 0. Then because it's quadratic there, you must factorize. So you can divide through or multiply through with a negative 1. And then you see there will be no factors. You can't factorize the sum of two squares. So there will be no values, no x-intercepts. If you can't factorize there, it means then you must calculate another point. Now to calculate another point there, you substitute any x value. It's easier to use 1 or negative 1 or maybe 2. But you substitute any value. I've used negative 1. Substitute it into your given equation. So it's negative 1 squared minus 1. So that's giving you then a negative 2. So that's giving me another point. You only do this step if you can't factorize for x-intercepts. Fourth step is to find the turning point. Now the turning point method is then 0 and the q value. 0 will be the line of symmetry. So what is the q value given there? So it's negative 1, so it will be 0, negative 1. Then you can place the dots. So that means your turning point y-intercept will be 0, negative 1. Then you can see there will be no x-intercept there. That's why I'm using another point. So I've used negative 1. Calculate negative 2. Because this left-hand side, right, will be the same or mirror image of the right-hand side, because the y-axis will be the line of symmetry, I can use symmetry to find the value here. So it will be plus 1, negative 2. If you look at the next one, x squared minus 1. So this is again your parabola because of the square there. First of all, you identify the a value. A value, it's then 1. Because it's 1, minimum value or a concave up, smiley face. The y-intercept will be the q value, which is negative 1. My x-intercepts, make the y 0, get your x squared minus 1, difference of squares, you factorize and you get your x-intercepts. Because you got x-intercepts, no need to calculate another point. Fourth point there is to do the turning point. Turning point formula will be 0. That means it's turning on the y-axis and the q. Now my q value was negative 1, so the 0, negative 1. Remember that your turning point and your y-intercept will be the same. And now you just dot it down. So that's my y-intercept, 0, negative 1. Those will be coordinates. And then your x-intercept is negative 1 and 0. And that's plus 1 and 0. And once you draw this, remember it's a curve. It's not a straight line. You take the left-hand side and you come up, joining it up to the turning point. And remember, this is the middle. So the mirror image on the other side must look the same as the left and the right-hand side. Right, so now we can also look at the other questions there. If you look at number 5, right, same exercise. Now you must sketch negative 5x squared plus 5. Once again, you identify the square, parabola. So then you look at the a value. So it's negative 5. Because it's negative, it's giving you a sad face. So we say it's a maximum or concave down graph. Y-intercept will be the q value. The q value recognized there is 5. And then my x-intercepts, y must be 0. And then you must factorize. Because the 5 is a common factor there, I can divide by my negative 5, which enables you to get x squared minus 1. Now you factorize. Remember, if it's quadratic equal to 0, you factorize. It's difference of squares. So you get your x values there, x-intercepts. And because you got x-intercepts there, you're not going to use the other point. turning point, again you use the 0 and the Q. So the 0 is still there, line of symmetry, and the Q will be 5 according to your sketch. Now you're going to dot it down, x-intercept -1, x-intercept +1, turning point 0 and 5. And remember, if you draw this side here, left hand side must be mirror image to the right hand side there. And you always put arrows because you're still carrying on there. If the equation entails in fractions, don't be scared. You just multiply with the LCD. But the first step again is to get the A value. So it's positive for half, so you will have a smiley face. Minimum value, so it means then concave up. Y-intercept will be my Q value. Remember, if there's no value there, it's the origin, it's 0. X-intercept, you make Y 0. Now because of that fraction there, you times then by the LCD. Because there's a 2, I will times by 2. If that was a 4, you times by 4. And you multiply throughout all the terms. Once again, you see there will be no factors. You can't factorize that one. If you can't factorize that one, remember then you must calculate another point. Easier to choose a value for x, because x is the independent variable. It will be either +1 or a -1. So if I substitute a 1 into the given equation, you get 1.5. But remember, if you substitute 1, that will also be the same answer for -1 because of symmetry. Then we're just going to dot it down. Turning point, y-intercept is 0, 1. And then 1 and 1.5. Remember, this is half the parabola there. Using your symmetry, you get the other point this side. So it's -1.5, and then you get that answer there. Right. So the same with number px. So if you look at that once again, you'll see that 3 will be positive. That's why I've got a smiley face there. Minimum value, concave up. The Q is indicating the turning point and the y-intercept. And if you divide by 3 and factorize, you get -3 and +3. Always remember, if there's questions on the range will be y element, right? And make sure about the functions they ask you about the questions. If you do that, it's -infinity and then 5 included because that's my turning point. Or you can say y is less than equal to 5. Right. Coordinates of the turning point, x value will be 0, that's your line of symmetry or axis of symmetry, and then the q value. Line of symmetry, the equation will be x is equal to 0. So that was a discussion of the homework. Let's do the last bit of your parabola, and that is if the diagram is given. Now we must determine the equation of the parabola. Now to determine the equation of the parabola, we make use of the general form, which is then ax² plus the q. Now you know that the a will be the shape and the q will be the turning point or the y-intercept. If you look at the x and the y, it will be any point on that specific graph. So if this is given, if this parabola is given, and you must find now the equation of the parabola, first of all, you identify the y-intercept, which is also the turning point. So if you look at that, you see the turning point is 0, so y is equal to 0. Can you see then the 4 and the 1 is given? That will be your x and your y. So to find then the value of a, we substitute those values into the general form. So once again, your y-intercept is then the origin, 0, 0, which imply then that my q will be 0. Now you substitute the 0 into your q value there, your general form. And then you substitute the point 4 and 1, remember that's your x and your y. And that enables you work then according to the equation rules, that a is 1/16. Now what must I do? Remember, I must do the equation. So the equation is then y equals 1/16, because that's the a value, x², The q is 0, so I don't have to write anything there. Okay, and that's then how to find the equation of the parabola. So let's have a look at this next example. If you look at this example here, right, what is given? In this case, the turning point is given there. So it's 0, 5. You recognize first, identify the turning point, and then you look, that's another point. Okay, turning point, and that's the q value. This then will be your x and your y value. So what will you do first? Identify the y-intercept, or the turning point, that's 0, 5. And to find the a, we must substitute the coordinates of a point and the q value. So if you look at this then, remember your general form is then ax squared plus the q. So that's my identification of my y-intercept is 0 and 5. So that implies then that 5 will be my q value. So now you substitute the 5 into the general form, into the place there. Then you substitute the point, which is x and y, into that form. So that's my x value, and that's my y value. Remember, negative 2 squared giving you positive 4a. Use your rules for equations, and then you get negative a half. If you get a negative answer, just make sure, correlate that all, and look at your graph. Can you see it's a maximum one, a sad face? So that one's supposed to be a negative value there. Now you've got the value of a and q, and then you substitute both of them into your general form, and that's your equation then. What if turning point or the y-intercept is not given? You only got two different points there. Can you see you've got 2 and 1, it's just a point, and then you've got negative 1 and 4, it's just a point. There's no turning point, no y-intercept given. So now what you can do now is you must substitute the 1 point, x and y, substitute again x and y. You're forming two equations, and then you solve them simultaneously. So let's have a look. So you first substitute your x and your y. So you substitute your x and your y, and then you get your second point you substitute as well. Now you can use either elimination or you can use substitution to find the values there. You can choose your method there. Right, and this enables you then to get a is equal to negative 1. What must I do then? You take that value and you substitute it in either number 1 or number 2. That gives you then the q value. And then don't stop there, because we're asking you the equation of the parabola. Then you go back and say the a was negative 1, and then you put your square back, and the q was then plus 5, and you put that then back.